Howdy folks. So from previous videos you may remember my workstation Volta and my file server Tesla here. And Tesla's been in this case for far too long in my opinion. It's some cheap NZXT $50 special, and I bought this simply because I needed a case that had slots for 8 3.5-inch discs, and I didn't have a hell of a lot of money left over after I spent $2,500 on hard drives for it. So that was sort of what it ended up being, but it's not a great case. It's flimsy metal, it's very loud as a result, it doesn't have good dust filtration in it. I'm not totally happy with it. I never really was. So I've got this new project coming up where I'm going to be building a backup server, which is going to fully replicate the data on that machine. And in order to do that, of course, I need a case. So I thought rather than go out and spend a lot of money on a new case for my backup server, I thought I would buy a new case for Tesla and then use this case for the backup server, because of course, I mean, this case is kind of shit, and of course the backup server doesn't really, I mean, it's not on all the time, so the acoustics and stuff doesn't matter that much for it. So I went out and I bought this Corsair Obsidian 750D, and this case, as you can see by the picture, is exactly the same as what Volta runs in. So I'm now going to have two identical cases. And I bought another one of these because, I mean, it was, first of all, it was on sale, but also it's a really great case. I really enjoy it. It's quiet. It's got good dust filtration. It's got a nice big window on the side of it. It really fits what I want in a case for pretty much any machine, workstation or server. And the reason why I never thought of buying this beforehand, the reason why I'm waiting till now to do it, is because this case only supports 6 discs. It has 2 3-disc bays, and of course I need at least 8 3.5-inch discs for an equivalent configuration in this. So you'd think it's kind of out of the question. However, those 3-disc bays you can move around, and I'm not using any of them in this machine. In fact, they're not even in the machine because there's a liquid cooling setup where the discs would normally be. So I can take the disc bays from this case, which I still have, add them to the disc bays that the new case comes with, and I can end up with 12 3.5-inch bays, which is perfect. And I don't have to spend any extra money on accessories. So I'm going to get this out of the box and transfer all the hardware from there into here. Okay, so it's actually the next day. The case is all unboxed and ready to go. It's not broken, the window's intact, so that's all good. I've tried playing with how I'm going to do the disc bays. I've got all 12 bays in now, and I've just put an 80 gig drive in to see how they work. Unfortunately, you can only put them in with the connectors on the back side. You can't have the connectors facing you, which doesn't look as good, but it would be nicer for cable management, but whatever. So I'll deal with that when I actually put it in there. So everything's ready, all the VMs are shut down, so I'm going to just power off the file server. It should, my app server's not going to be happy about it. This is the first time I'm actually powering off this machine now that I've switched everything over to the InfiniBand network, which will actually just go down completely. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen when I power off the server, but I got to do that now. I got to do it from my phone, unfortunately, because my workstation can't be on when the server goes down. So my phone is kind of the only option here. And it's kind of difficult to use SSH on a cell phone. And typing passwords and things. Okay, so should power off. You can probably hear the discs powering down one by one. And then it goes quiet. Most of the noise in this room is actually from Tesla. It's not my workstation. It's this thing. So hopefully putting it in the new case is going to reduce the noise. So time to unplug it, and I'll show you what's inside of it now, and then I'll think maybe do a time lapse as I move everything and clean it and put it in the new case. So this is inside Tesla now. I think this is actually the first time I may have actually shown this on camera. So we've just got 8 4TB disks. These are all Seagate ST4000DM000s. They've all done pretty well. I've had one disk that got a bit flaky, but I took it out, zeroed it. It appears to be fine now, so it actually may go back in my backup server. I may end up only purchasing 7 drives for it instead of 8, because again, I mean, if it craps out in the backup server, it's not a big deal. We've got 2 SSDs, so they're both 60 gigabytes. This is just a Mushkin Kronos Deluxe, and I've got an OCZ here. They have 2 partitions on them each. This one has the root file system and one half of the ZFS intent log, and then the ZFS intent log is mirrored onto this SSD, and the rest of this is just the L2 ARC. And this SSD is kind of crap, and it's dying. I think it's got like 23% life left or something, according to Smart. But I'm just going to keep this thing, I'm just going to run it into the ground, basically, because it's the L2 ARC. So, I mean, if it craps out, there's no risk of data loss, so it's not a big deal. It's got 24 gigabytes of memory. It originally had 8 gigs, and that's why it has 24 now. So it had 2 4 gig sticks, and then I added the 2 8 gig sticks. So actually, no, these 2 would be the 4 gig sticks, and the orange ones would be the 8 gig sticks. So that's why it's 24. It's kind of an odd number. Normally I would do 16 or 32, but I don't need 32. The 24 gig memory is much better than the 8 that I had in here. Like, there, you can definitely tell that that is how I did the memory. It's been so long since I did this that I've kind of forgotten how I did it all. But yeah, you can definitely tell the difference. I mean, the ARC size is much bigger, and I've manually set it such that it uses all the available memory. Basically, ZFS stops at nothing for caching, because that's pretty much all this thing does. So that's what I want. I just use a stock Intel cooler. I've had people tell me this is a bit absurd, but it's just a Pentium. It's an Intel Pentium G2020, and I mean, yes, they still make Pentiums, and it's a perfect processor for something like this. It's just powerful enough for a file server. I mean, this thing barely does anything. I mean, ZFS, even compression and stuff, you don't see it. I mean, it's just perfect. It's cheap, and it's low power, and it produces barely any heat. So the Intel stock cooler is perfectly acceptable. And this one seems to be okay. This one is made by Delta, and you can actually tell the manufacturer. There are ones that Foxconn makes. There's also ones that there's another company. It starts with an N. I can't remember it off the top of my head. That also make Intel stock fans. Delta, I believe, make the best ones by far. The actual fan motor design is entirely different in them. So even though the end result looks similar, there actually are some Intel coolers that are better than others. So I'm kind of glad that this is the one that I have. I mean, I had one that failed in my app server, and it was a Foxconn, so I replaced it with a Delta, because I just happen to have a bunch of these, because most CPUs, most Intel CPUs I have, I put aftermarket coolers on. So I usually end up with excess stock coolers that I can sort of pick the best ones and put those into service. All the item cards, there's 2 HBAs. There's a, for SATA, there's a 2-port one here, and there's a 4-port one here, which I'm only using 2 ports of so that I don't saturate it. Dual port gigabit NIC and dual port InfiniBand NIC. I've got a Noctua fan here. I don't know what model this is. I'll check it when I take it out, because I will be taking out this fan and reusing it, because Noctua makes, in my opinion, the best PC case fans. They're basically indestructible. They're incredibly quiet, and they're just great. So I will be taking this out. It's got the rubber mounts in it for really quiet operation. So there's no vibration. There's no screws in this. So I want to take those out. And Seasonic G Series power supply. This is a 450 watt. I have Seasonic G Series in all of my critical machines. The only one that doesn't have one is actually in my my router. My router has a Corsair, which I do kind of want to replace because I don't really trust it. But Seasonic's the only company I'll buy a power supply from at all anymore. I've taken apart enough power supplies and I've seen enough horror, both from what other people tell me and what I've seen in my own experience. They're really the only company that seems to care at all about what goes into a power supply. And I'm an engineer. You look at how something's designed and you can tell just by looking at it the relative quality and how long you think it's going to last. And Seasonic's the only thing I'm really happy about. So yeah, their stuff goes in everything that I build now. Cable management, it doesn't look like there was cable management done in here, but there really was. I mean, all the motherboard power goes through the other side. The problem is the motherboard tray on this case it's not very thick, and it's really difficult to actually route anything at all on the back side. So I do have the motherboard power running in here. It's kind of been flattened over the years, and there is some stuff running in here, but a lot of the cables were just not long enough. Basically, things like the CPU supplementary power connector, of course, the cable wasn't long enough, and I wasn't going to go to the extent to buy extensions. I didn't really think that was a worthwhile thing. So, I mean, I've tried to route some of the cables, but didn't really work out too well. There's not a lot of airflow down here, so I'm not really worried. I don't really care. So yeah, I'm going to try and do more cable management in the new case because the new case has a motherboard tray that's actually pretty far away. It's got lots of cutouts for cable routing, so I'm going to try and do a better job of that in the new case. Some other notes: the power supply in this case is mounted up, so with a fan facing up. The new case has a vent on the bottom. The idea is you mount it upside down and it sucks air from the bottom. I'm not going to be doing that. I didn't do that in my desktop, and I'm not going to do it in this because I'm on carpet. So what's going to happen is it's just going to kind of sit flush with the floor, and it's not really going to get a lot of airflow. So I'm going to keep it mounted upright like this and just ignore that fan. There's really no issue. I mean, all the air it's drawing is pretty much going to be coming from the inlets on the front of the case, which are all filtered on the actual on that case. So I'm not gonna bother flipping the power supply. And I've also got to take some data off of these discs. I have a table in my wiki that basically describes all the stats on these discs, so that I know which disc is where and all the info on it. And I can get most of the info from the firmware on the discs except for date of manufacture. So I have to write down the date of manufacture for some of these discs because I didn't get them when I initially put them in a couple years ago. So yeah, I think it's time to stop rambling, put the camera on the tripod, and time-lapse mode. The one thing I'll mention, these things, most people will call these things death adapters because, the Molex to SATA adapters, these things have a really high probability of bursting into flames, actual flames. The only reason why I have these, this one I need, I need these. It's the only reason why I have them. I really would prefer I not use these, but good luck getting a power supply that's got 10 SATA connectors on it that's, not rated for 900 watts or something. The only reason I'm using this is because I've had this adapter for about 10 years and it's never failed me. It's the only reason why I trust it, because otherwise, they all seem to be made in the same place and they all just burst into flames. It's the horror stories I've read on Reddit about these things scare the living shit out of me. Since the last time I used it, it seems it started to leak grease again. Doesn't seem I can really stop that. It's not nearly as bad this time though. Whatever, I guess that's what you get for a $20 eBay product, I guess. Still works though. That's all that matters. So first I need to screw in the actual drive cages because I just slotted them in first time. I didn't screw them in. The discs are designed to be screwless, toolless install. So I'm going to try them because they've got these nice bushings. If it doesn't work out, I can always take the bushings out and screw the discs in because they, well, actually no, I don't even need to do that. They actually have holes that I can put screws in. But I don't know if I'm going to do that. This is just a junk drive. Still works, but junk drive, not really important for this. So I got to find screws that will fit in there. And yes, bag of goodies. Okay, so I want to put the Noctua fan here because, of course, it's a much better fan for my application. So I'm going to keep this and keep it as a spare because it's identical to the two front fans as well as the fans on my desktop. So if any of those fail, I can just use this as a spare. So technically, I only need 2 screws. I don't need these extra screws because this motherboard is pretty narrow, but I may not take those standoffs out. I might just leave them there. If they're not interfering, it may just be easier. Yeah, I'm just going to leave the other standoffs the way they are. I'm not going to bother to take any out, but I don't have to add any, which is nice. Now getting this I/O shield, getting the EMI fingers on the I/O shield on these crappy, cheaper motherboards is super, super a pain in the ass. I do like the foam gasket ones that are used on the higher end motherboards now. They're also black, so they look nice with the case. But unfortunately, can't always be buying the high-end motherboard models for servers like this. Holy fuck, that sucked. That was worse than last time. The DVI connector really, really has tight fins against it. But always double check that none of the fins are stuck in any of the connectors before you screw the motherboard down, and definitely before you power it up, because that would not end well. So now that I've uncable managed that, my hope is that the cables are now long enough to plug into the header, and it looks like they will be. Excellent. Just barely long enough. So I just looked at the old case, and the wires have been in there so long that they've all sort of stiffened up in the right location, and that tells me that this one is power LED plus, and the other one's power LED minus. Didn't have to guess. Wonderful. Cool. Well, so far cable management's working. I'm going to soon do something and it's going to break that. It's going to look like shit. I think it's going to be the power supply next, after all of the front panel. So I can finally now use USB 3.0 because this motherboard has USB 3.0, and the case, the old one didn't have any USB 3.0, but this one does. And I'm not going to connect the audio front panel because I disabled the onboard audio on the board. So it's just another potential way of getting ESD or some random shit into this machine. So I'm just going to leave it on the back side and cable manage it. No point in connecting something that's not even enabled. Now you may ask why I use all 8 pins of the CPU supplementary power connector instead of just 4, because the CPU clearly doesn't need that many. And the reason why is simply because I can. Power supplies, I mean, generally speaking, you want the lowest possible resistance path. So giving it 8 pins instead of 4 is having the resistance. So technically, your CPU will have better power regulation and there'll be slightly less loss in that cabling. So I mean, even though the CPU doesn't draw very many watts, why not? I mean, it's literally just connect another cable. I mean, you can't honestly be that lazy. Cool. And then supplementary power is not going to reach. Yeah, no, supplementary power is, it's a joke. It comes up to about here on the other side of the board. So yeah, that's not happening. That's I mean, it was worth a shot, but okay, cool. So that's the power. We'll put in the PC speaker as well. I'm trying to dust everything before it goes back in here. So PC speaker, it's ugly. Put it on the other side because we'll be able to hear it just fine on the other side. So no need to keep it where we can see it. So we can get that. Cool. So now it's just add-in cards, SATA, and discs, and all of their appropriate power connectors. So what I'm going to do is I want to keep the discs in the same order as before. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. But I also wanted, of course, to take all of their date codes. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so all the discs are in. Got our 4 empty spots, which may be used for later expansion, whether I make a new VDEV or I tear down the pool and make a bigger RAID Z2 or Z3 array. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do it. If I was to add more discs, I'd probably make 2 VDEVs of 6. But that'll be for another day. I don't have that much data yet. Okay, so power or data first? I think power first, data second. So I'm going to try and reuse all of the modular connectors that I've got and see if I can make this work. This may take several attempts to get this right, because it's probably like a puzzle. It'll only go together properly one way. So and there is one thing that I haven't done yet, which is the fans in the front. And the reason why I haven't done those yet is because I don't actually have a way of plugging them in. They're 3-pin motherboard type connectors, and unfortunately my motherboard does not have any connectors for these, unfortunately, and I don't have any adapters to Molex or resistor adapters, which is what I want to run these on. I don't want to run these at 100%. So what I'm going to do is I think I might just leave these out and see how well the drives fare temporarily without cooling. I've done it before on the other device, on the other one. Especially in the wintertime it's okay. Summertime not okay, but wintertime it's okay. So I'm going to leave these things disconnected, and then I'm going to probably have to go out to my computer store, buy some connectors, some adapters, sorry, and that will allow me to actually connect up the front fans. I'll probably get one with a resistor in it because I don't want to run them at 100%. And if I can't find one with a resistor, then I'll just make one. It's not hard. I've done it before. I mean, you literally just solder a resistor in line with one of the legs of the thing, and that's it. So, yeah, it's too bad. Unfortunately, this motherboard's a little bit basic, but that was kind of the point. It doesn't need to be anything special. So, yeah, if you're wondering why I didn't bother with those, I'll just wire them through the front so that I don't have to take the back off again. Just keep all the zip ties together, or the twist ties together. I prefer to use twist ties for cable management than zip ties because you can take them apart and reuse them, which is very useful because eventually you're going to have to take them apart sometime to change a disc or do something. So this doesn't reach the disc, unfortunately, but it might reach an SSD. I put the SSD bay there. So let's attempt to try that. Now these bays, the SSD actually faces into the machine, so it goes in like this, I believe. Yes, it goes in like this. And then it kind of snaps in, and that's your SSD bay. So if I put one here, got some cables in the way. I could potentially that's in. So I could potentially connect this to here if I flip it around correctly. The theory is that this guy, yeah, I mean I can just barely make that. So I might do that, but there's still discs behind here that don't have power yet, so I have to get them done first. And then of course we've got the boot disc as well, which goes in like this. Okay, so that's the boot disc. So those are the SSDs. The other two I'll probably put in wherever. I'll probably put them... See, the problem with putting these cages on the top is we've got these cables coming out. I don't want to put much more pressure on these because I don't want to bend the boards on the bottom of these discs. So I may end up putting the SSDs on the bottom and then just leaving these off. Worst case scenario, I don't put any of the SSDs in these bays, and I just stick the SSDs down with tape or something somewhere else in the case. But I kind of want to use these bays just because, you know, it's kind of the right thing to do. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 SATA, and I've only got to connect 4 more things. So let me think for a minute how to do this. So anyway, my camera doesn't have a very long battery charge, so I gave it a quick charge, not a full charge, but while I dealt with the SATA cables. Anyway, I found out that I can't use the built-in 2.5-inch bay. They just don't work. There's far too many cables here for that to work. So I went out and I scrounged up 2 2.5 to 3.5-inch bay adapters, both by ADATA. Interestingly, one of them is metal and one of them is plastic, which is kind of odd. But anyway, I don't really care. They're going to go in the bays on the front, and that's how I'm going to have to do the connection. It's just, it's temporary. I mean, if I ever do want to fill those bays, I can put these somewhere else. But for now, I'll leave these on the other side. And because yeah, there's no way these are even going on. I'm just going to leave them out of the case. There's just no way. But yeah, all the cables fit for the SATA, which is really nice. And they all route really nicely on the other side. So I've routed them all to all the different cards, and they all work. So that's good. So I've just got these two, which there's going to be no issues getting these in because they're going to be really close. So no issues there. And I'll just I'll stick them in here. Why not? This should work theoretically. I can either align it, I guess, with the back or the front. So it doesn't really reach all the way for either one. Or maybe these inserts. It's odd. Holes, are they not big enough? Oh, that's nasty. Seriously? The holes in these adapters are not big enough for the screwless plugs to go in. What the fuck? Like, seriously? These are supposed to be standard screw size. Are they not M3? They're not M3. What the fuck? They're not M3. That's so dirty. What? Okay. That's a fail. Okay, new plan. I'm going to take these shake-proof grommets off and just screw it in then. Because that's a fail. Why on earth would they do that? Yeah, that's just really fucked up. Why would you do that? See, now how do I secure this? Because the screws are not long enough to make this work because this thing is wider than the disc. Right? There's supposed to be play in it. And I need screws that are now hella long to make that work. Whose idea was this? I mean, this is a fail on Corsair's part and a fail on ADATA's part. Mostly ADATA's part. How am I going to secure this? Am I just going to use one screw? I'm going to be really cheap and just do it with one screw. And just hold it on there. I feel like that may be the only option I have. Let's see if the screws in the other case are long enough to make this work. I'm gonna say that no. No, they're not long enough. They have just a tiny bit of bite, but like basically nothing. Oh no, yeah, I forgot. It's because I'm trying to put an M3 screw in, something that's clearly not M3. But I don't care. Right? We'll just make that go in there. Is it like an M2.5 or something? Probably is. Well, now it's an M3. And that's about as good as I'm gonna get, I guess. That's a fat disappointment. Whatever. I mean, it's an SSD. It has no moving parts at all, so, and it weighs nothing, so it's literally just to prevent it from sliding when I tip the case while moving it. That's pretty much the only reason why I'm securing these things at all. I mean, in the actual original case, I didn't secure anything. It was just, the SSDs were just, one of them was screwed in, the other one was literally just floating. It was just sitting at the bottom of the case. So I clearly don't need much in the way of security on these drives. Yeah, I'm just going to tie this all up, make sure all the cables and connections are in properly, and I think we'll be ready to install this. So, here it is. So much room for activities still. I really like this. So anyway, it's time to seal it up, and I think it's time to fire it up. And hopefully, everything is still good. It was kind of a difficult thing to get the other side on, kind of bent out due to the number of cables, but I put it on, and it'll settle down as the cables relax into their new position. So hopefully all the connections for all the discs are good and solid, and hopefully ZFS doesn't completely shit the bed when I boot it back up and all the discs have changed positions. That, of course, would be kind of bad. It's also infinitely heavier now than it was before. Everything's also way higher up, so all the cables on the back are going to have to move a little bit. So there's 5 cables. There's 2 Ethernet, 2 InfiniBand, and 1 IEC mains. Pull it back all the way so that it sort of lines up with the front of my other rig. Okay, so it's on. It's all, actually it's not on. It's ready. So now the moment of truth, I guess. Does everything work? Well, PC speaker's a bit louder now. Must be in a place where it resonates in that back panel. So I got the power LED wired right, that's good. And the HDD LED is also right. Fans connected, that's spinning. Okay, that would be the no keyboard beep. So so it posted. I see disk activity, so it's obviously booting. That's good. I'll get my phone ready so I can SSH into this once it comes up. There's not really an easy way of knowing when it's done booting. Oh, there we go. I don't know if you heard that. All the disks came up at once, so that would obviously be when the ZFS kernel module came up. Okay, so now I could probably SSH into it. Oh no, still booting. There we go. Okay, so let's authenticate, because I don't store passwords on my phone, because that would be a dumb thing to do. Okay, it's booted, and let's check the status of the ZFS pool, because that's the only thing that I care about, to be honest. Is that still okay? And well, I can prove to you. Tank is online. All the disks are online, and no known data errors. So we have our spares available, our cache disk is there, our log is there, and all of our disks. In fact, now the disks are showing back as serial numbers. Most of them anyway. It's weird. It's weird how sometimes they show serial numbers, sometimes they show letters. But yeah, that looks good. Looks very good. I check logs. Yeah. Logs look okay. I'm not sure how the InfiniBand is going to fare now. I never bothered to check the other machine, my app server, to see how it handled not having a connection for so long. But the real moment of truth is to fire up the desktop, and you can hear the fans now. It's file server is so much quieter now, although it doesn't have fans, so I will have to fix that. But if my desktop can boot, then we're good, because the desktop requires that the network be up in order to boot. It's got a boot dependency on the NFS shares. Now, it may take up to 2 minutes to mount for the first time, because when I found there's this weird authentication. I don't know if it's a bug really. I think it is. But basically, due to the way I do NFS authentication, the first time that you try to mount an NFS share on this machine, once it boots up, takes about 2 minutes. And then there's some weird timeout that happens and a fallback, and then it works. And then connecting is pretty quick and easy after that. But just the first time after boot, it always takes forever. So yeah, it's kind of hair-raising 2 minutes to make sure the server's up. But I think everything went perfectly fine. I mean, the worst case scenario probably would have been I booted up and then one of the disks just wasn't detected. I've had that happen before after I've swapped out disks. I've had, bumped cables and stuff, and a couple disks haven't been detected. But in this case, it looks all good. So I would say it's a success. And get the camera out of that tripod. So yeah, there we are. I think it looks quite nice. Again, you can't really see. There isn't really much point to a window in this house, but when I move, I'll be. Oh God, look at the fingerprints. Those aren't fingerprints. Those are dust prints. Those are just dust. I'll have to clean that. But yeah, once I move, I'm probably gonna put the file server somewhere else, and it will be probably in a position where I can actually see inside of it, because I do kind of want to make use of the window. I put windows on everything, so I like that. So yeah, there it is. There is the yeah, fans are not going, but yeah, there it is. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I'll have to clean that up, but I think it's all good. So rather than ramble on any further, I think I'll stop here. Desktop still hasn't mounted yet, which is a little bit unnerving, but I'm sure that it will mount soon. Of course, I say that. come around the back. Yeah, so both InfiniBand links are up. As you can see, there's the orange light for both. So that's all working. There's actually a pretty decent amount of air coming out of that Noctua fan back there. So yeah. Oh, there we go. So desktop just mounted. Excellent. So I think that means everything's good to go. So anyway, oh, I know this was pretty much mostly just a time lapse, but hopefully you enjoyed that or something. Thanks for watching.